With these software companies, these AI companies coming in trying to replace the agent, one of the ways that they can't compete is on a local level.
A lot of the top teams and brokers who do anywhere from like 100 deals a year to even 1,000 deals a year, their problem actually isn't tech and AI. The biggest problem is 99% of their market doesn't even know their name. There's 1.5 million realtors today doing 4 million deals. Back in the 70s, there was 400,000 realtors doing 4 million deals. Right. So it's the difference between one realtor averaging 3 deals versus one realtor averaging 10.
We look at some of these teams who started and they've essentially quadrupled their business in 2-3 years just because they are building through media and they're trying to get their brand out there. People are knowing them when other agents are just not willing to do it.
After 7 years, I've never made a public announcement of the company.
With investment in AI in the real estate space nearly doubling over the last couple of years from $150 billion to over $300 billion, we're seeing one of the biggest shifts we may ever see for the agent at a national level. And with these tech companies and AI companies always trying to replace the agent, what we're seeing is a way to fight against that with the hyper local agent. And Andrew, as someone who's worked with some of the biggest local agents and teams, what's been the reason you've seen these larger teams start building out a hyper-local brand?
A lot of the top teams and brokers who do anywhere from like 100 deals a year to even 1,000 deals a year in a market as big as 100,000 people or even 1 million people, their problem actually isn't tech and AI. The biggest problem is 99% of their market doesn't even know their name. So the biggest problem the agent faces is more obscurity. And while AI can come at a national scale, it can't come and compete with an agent at a local scale. And you're someone who's built and grown a lot of the biggest like brands and names on YouTube in real estate. So I was curious, like, why are agents deciding, especially some of the biggest like teams and brokers that you've spoken to, why have they decided to move into YouTube?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things we're seeing across our biggest teams is that they're ultimately just really tired of relying on some of these platforms where they feel like they're essentially renting instead of owning it. So, things like Zillow and these different, companies that they may use for their marketing, it's not theirs. It's not something they built that they own. And so if, that gets shut down overnight or they raise the cost or, something happens, they essentially could lose out on a lot of their business. So with YouTube, what we've seen is you essentially get to own the entire stack, right? If you make the videos and it's your content and people see you, you have a lot more leverage and you're basically building something that's going to last for a long time. And then if you kind of continue that down with when leads come in, you build out the way you actually nurture those leads with your own content, with your own media, and you build this really, really cool, essentially full funnel that you own. No one can really take it away, right? And so a lot of our teams are looking at that for being the reason to do it, and also the scaling factor. Like you just see so much growth happen, not just year 1, but year 2, year 3. I mean, we look at some of these teams who started and they've essentially quadrupled their business in 2-3 years just because they are building through media and they're trying to get their brand out there. People are knowing them when other agents are just not willing to do it. So, and Andrew, I guess I'd ask you is like, what have you seen to be kind of the biggest thing for your teams and your agents?
Yeah, I mean, there's the traditional way of building the business through referrals, sphere of influence, which is great because they know, like, trust you, but it's not really like, water faucet. You can't really up the dial and decrease it as you need it to scale, which has caused a lot of people to move into platforms like Zillow, which is great. The problem is the ROI is usually pretty linear. Like you spend $1 and you get maybe $2-3 back.
Yeah.
And then they shift their model and it kind of affects, but it's great for speed. It's not as great for a long-term business. So we're seeing a lot of teams who have traditionally spent $1,000, $10,000 plus on paid move more to organic. And as a result, they're able to actually build their own audience, build their email lists, and then they can end up converting those. As an example, we had someone who started a new channel in Raleigh, North Carolina from zero. And she didn't have a YouTube channel, didn't have video content. And within the first 3 months, she already had 9 appointments, closed 1 deal. And then within 6 months, she was starting to generate close to 15 leads a month with a pretty high conversion rate. You've learned from Patty Galloway, and as a result, you've gotten a lot of the bigger real estate YouTube channels to bring you on to help them grow even bigger. But I was just curious in general, why is YouTube positioned to be one of the top platforms today?
Yeah, for sure. I think, when you look at YouTube, one of the things that shocks most of our agents when we actually get into like the analytics, for example, is their audience. And I think most agents don't know this, but you've got most of our agents will be about 60 to 70% of their audience is watching on TV. And they're usually older. They usually are in that 35 to about 65 plus range. And right now, at least in the market, you have a lot of where the money's at is in the kind of older demographic in that age range, where you have people that have been sitting on properties for the last 10, 20 years and they're now ready to retire or, move to another place. And they have the money, where the younger demographic right now, salaries are not yet caught up with where the prices are. So first of all, I'd just say like we're actually reaching people that are able to make decisions right now, and a lot of agents are look at content as something that you're reaching the younger demographic. You're dealing with a lot of teenagers and kids, which is just really not true. So that'd be the first thing, is we're able to get in front of the right people. I think the second thing is, if you look at YouTube, we were talking about this the other day, where it's like YouTube is literally on every remote now, and it's one of the only free kind of buttons you can click on a remote, and it goes to YouTube, and people will just casually watch YouTube now, and it's become almost like a replacement for the TV. And so like you look at something like a mobile device or a computer, like sometimes people are watching content, they're not in the necessarily like the headspace to make a decision, right? As you're scrolling through TikToks and shorts, like you're just essentially getting stopped by a 3-second hook. Versus YouTube, you have to physically click and choose what you want to watch. So, if I make a video about the 5 best places to live in, Raleigh, North Carolina, for example, and someone physically chooses to click on that, there's a pretty high intent behind, that click. And it's 20 minutes long, not 30 seconds long. So you're getting to build such a strong relationship with, your audience, that you can't necessarily do a short form. So I'd say that's been the biggest thing, is kind of those things stacking up, and also just past Netflix and viewership, right? So, these stats just show like, to me, really bullish on YouTube kind of over the next couple of years. And
yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's a channel in San Francisco, their bigger team, and she got into YouTube and works more in the higher net worth market there as well. And nearly 50% of her audience is above the age of 45. And the first year on YouTube, she generated 5 to 15 leads a month. And then the second year, generating about 15 to 25 leads a month. They're well over 30 to 40 million in sales. And a lot of it is that older demographic, wealthier. And most people don't realize that there is that demographic on YouTube because of what you said, where you have YouTube being the only free streaming platform on every single TV. So everyone is using it. And that kind of is a big reason why for the last several months, we've been working through kind of this big shift in what we wanted to kind of bring and help the agent and empower them with. And that kind of comes into what we're launching is Knwn Local.
Yeah.
And I was curious from you, why Knwn and then why local for the agent?
Yeah. So I think with our agents, we really took a lot of time to think about the name, and we had, I think we had a 6-hour session one day just going through all the names. And I think when we kind of broke down to the core of it, it's, agents really need to be known in their market. Like you mentioned earlier, it's like you can be in a city that, these top teams do 100, 200 transactions, maybe like 1,000 at the most. And that's not even like 1% of the market, right? So, you have so much more to grow if you can really go and become known in your local market, right? And when you kind of niche down into the core areas you work in, it's even more effective. We've seen countless times these smaller pockets of areas where we're specifically making content on, and no one else has made content on it. People have been craving for it, and an agent's able to supply that and do it at high level. It's like, all of a sudden the whole market starts flocking to that agent because there's a demand that's not being met, right? So if we can help our agents essentially become known in their local market, that's ultimately what we're, really trying to do.
The hyper local agent is probably where the future's heading.
Yeah.
Which is like one of the CEOs of the top 10 brokerages said that there's 1.5 million realtors today doing 4 million deals. Back in the 70s, there was 400,000 realtors doing 4 million deals. Right. So it's the difference between one realtor averaging 3 deals versus one realtor averaging 10.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more competition, but using media, building your own audience, building your own email lists is like one of the biggest ways to create a market of zero.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And then, the more and more, as time goes on, you're going to see more and more competition, more and more agents come, and, people are projecting a shift to happen in that. And if that shift does happen, it's going to be even more important to essentially have hyperlocal brand, right? Because especially with some of these, I know it's not a massive problem just yet, but with these software companies, these AI companies coming in, trying to, replace the agent, one of the ways that they can't compete is on a local level, right? They can compete on a national level and they can do all this marketing and, get people to sign up. But if you're the agent who's creating content about your local market, you're building relationships, you have, videos on every place to live, and, these people are moving there, want your insight, not just some, website or something, right? So if you're able to kind of set yourself up as that local agent, then you also kind of prevent yourself from potentially going out of business in the long run too. And you help compete against other agents. So yeah, I would say that's it. I mean, for you, Andrew, though, I know a lot of people, they've probably followed you around for the last couple of years. I mean, you've been in the space for 7 years. And so this is one of the biggest announcements I think you've ever made. So, what is this? What does Knwn feel like to you compared to, what you've been doing in the past? And what does that mean for agents?
After 7 years, I've never made a public announcement of the company. We've just kind of been building it. And this to me is day one of the company. This is day one of the brand, because I believe we didn't really have a brand before. The name was Impact Media. And there's a lot of people around me that was like, what does that even mean? That's not even a great name. And I was like, I agree, but name and brand is one of the hardest things to nail.
Yeah.
And it took this long for me to realize, this is what we actually do. This is what agents actually need. And that's why it feels like, even though we have a team of 55 people now, we work with a lot of the top YouTube channels. We run a lot of newsletters as well. It feels like day one, because it feels like we actually have a team. We actually have a brand, and we can actually take what we've been learning the past few years, and now we can actually use that and help the market a lot more through our team, our resources, the data we've collected. And I was curious because obviously this is kind of like the first public announcement that we are merging together. And going through a merger is basically like dating and marrying someone.
Basically.
You have to go through a lot of dating, and you have to find the right fit with the vision, the values, and where you want to go with the direction. I was curious, what made you want to make that decision? And then what did you kind of learn as we went through that?
When I was getting into the space, I think we really were setting out to be kind of the top YouTube agency, I guess you could say, in the real estate space. That was really our goal. And, over the months and years as we started doing it, a name kept kind of popping up from our sales calls. And obviously that was, you guys and what you were doing. And I think when we spoke, you'd mentioned essentially the same thing, that, number one, number two in the space, we just kind of bounced around the same clients, heard the same, people kept saying the same name. So, I think I reached out to you and I was like, hey, Andrew, this is what we're doing. Like, I know you're kind of doing something similar. Let's just talk. Let's just have a conversation. And, we had a, hour, 2 hour conversation, just talk through. And, we weren't holding things back. We were pretty open, just kind of shared, where we're at in the business. And I think that first conversation for me, was like, oh, this guy is legit. He, knows what he's doing in business. He's working with a lot of agents that are very successful. And is there ever a world where we don't compete against each other? And ultimately 1 + 1 = 5, that's the goal. And so, we spent a lot of time talking, and it wasn't a short thing because, we've got teams and we've got people that had questions and, what are you guys doing? Why are you doing this? Are you going to be okay? And, we have clients as well that we obviously both care about a lot, and we want to make sure at the end of the day they're taken care of. So it was a lot of time. I think we've been talking for 7-8 months and really working through all the details. We've, worked on or shown our individual processes. We've worked together on multiple clients already and seen how the synergies are. And I think ultimately we just have a lot of things that complement each other on the business level, which I'll let you speak on as well. What do you think? What do you think complements us in this kind of partnership as well?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me was always what you said, like 1 + 1 = 5. And one of the things that I've always seen in especially the tech world is that most venture capitalists, most capital people who give money to companies, founders, they won't give capital to companies that have a solo founder.
Yeah.
A lot of the times they require multiple founders. And it's just because 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 11. So that's what it comes down to for me. And the biggest thing with all of this is just realizing that, what I didn't know, and realizing that there is a lot of opportunity. And I spoke with a handful of people that I trust, people who have built great businesses, and mergers aren't the most common thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it kind of gets a bad rap because it's hard to find a right fit. It's hard to find complementary strengths. It's hard to find someone that you want to build for 10 years with. That's one of the biggest things is what are the visions of the company? What are the values of the company and the team? And can you build that for 10 years? And I think that's one of the biggest things, realizing working with you, is that I realize I understand YouTube. I understand strategy. I would say I'm pretty deep in it, but a little more wide, understanding.
Yeah.
Whereas when I started to talk to you, I realized how deep you actually go on YouTube and the level that you go from strategy to the YouTube briefs that you've done, the editing, the thumbnails, everything around it is just kind of another level. And it kind of raised my standard. And your ability to look for talent, find that higher quality talent as well, was another big thing that I noticed. So that was one of the biggest things for me, is finding someone who has the same vision and values, but then also had something that complemented very well.
Sure. No, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think we have, similar reasons for it that I, complementary, and I didn't go into detail, but, for Andrew, for those of you that know Andrew and have, worked with him for a while, or, team members, it's Andrew's, just around culture is phenomenal. If you see team culture and how he's really, driven the culture of the company, and, the way that your team talks to you, respects you, I think is just really admirable. And not a lot of people can do that. And I'd also say just the way you are focused on the future, right? For me, one of my kind of shortcomings, I would say, was sitting in the YouTube product maybe too much at times, right? I think it's a good thing, obviously, but there's limits to, where you want to go sometimes. And sometimes you got to look at the bigger picture of like, hey, what are we going to do in the next couple of years? Where are we going? Why are we doing this? And I think you're really, really good at doing that. Setting your eyes on like, what do agents really need? Not today, not what are they getting in the past, what do they need in the next 2-3 years down the line. And so that's a skill not a lot of people can, that they have. And because you're also talking to a lot of the top agents in the podcast, and you're getting to sit down with people who are thought leaders in the real estate space, you get to get insights that we get to also then turn into a bit of our YouTube service and how we can apply that. And that's really, I think, just great synergy all around. You've got I think we should have got great synergy. So I guess the question I'd ask you is like, what do you think is going to be the biggest change with the way we're building Knwn Local right now? Like for agents that work with us who maybe have questions, who are like, hey, what's going on? Where are we going in the next couple of years? Like, what do you see, how would you kind of respond to that?
Yeah, I'd say like one thing we can dive into in a little bit, just the future of a hyperlocal brand and all of the pieces that you actually need for that, because it's not just one. But I think the biggest thing that I think we've realized is that when you have this is across the whole team, so it counts all the creative, but like 55 plus people, you have 250 videos like a month that you're putting out. You have a lot of data.
Yeah, for sure.
You have a lot more resources. We're able to hire more like senior level leadership in roles like a lead designer, or like we were able to look at like a strategist who's worked with like Red Bull, PlayStation, stuff like that. So it's more team, more resources, more data, where it's all under one roof instead of trying to do it alone.
Yeah.
And that just kind of goes back to like the 1 + 1 = 5.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we kept talking about how we were both solving the same problems in slightly different ways at the same time, almost like you would have to solve this problem, solve it. And like, we were just like, why don't we just do it together, solve one problem together and build faster? And I think that's also allowed us to, things like backend systems, like we're able to develop our own custom backend system to handle the volume of projects that we're doing, talent, like we're actually able to show the vision to some of these top level talent, which otherwise would not join the company. If you don't have somewhere to go, a lot of this top level talent's not, they're looking for a purpose and a vision as well. So, being able to showcase what we're doing, where we're going, has, HubSpot, like, the strategist from HubSpot who we hired, and it's just been able to acquire this next level talent that really is ultimately going to make the product better at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, and beyond that, I think really the last question I'd kind of ask on the partnership is like, where do you see this kind of going in the next couple of years? Like, I know if today is day one, where do you see kind of us being 2 years, 3 years down the line for the agent, and what we're able to kind of do for them?
When you look at marketing as a whole, after 7 years kind of bucketed down to 3 core things, you have building the audience, growing the email list, and then closing deals. And all of the marketing kind of serves those 3 core goals at some level. And just asking yourself which platforms do each the best, which ones have less supply and higher demand, or which ones have the highest ROI. So we've looked at YouTube, and that's one of the biggest ones. And we've also looked at people who've built hyperlocal brands. We have a few people that we work with, Kyle in Kansas City, Brandon in the Chicago suburbs, and a lot of them are doing multiple things, and they all play into each other. So they have the YouTube channel, and then they take that content, and that becomes short form content. And the short form goes back to the long form. But one of the biggest things is YouTube and short form both grow an email list, and most agents have an email list that they have built for years, but most of them are not consistent, or if they're emailing them, it's templated stuff, or a lot of it is just real estate. It's not local. So when you look at a lot of the platforms, you have like YouTube, you have email for hyperlocal newsletters, you have hyperlocal Instagram, and there are other platforms, but those are probably the 3 core fundamentals. and then you can do ads at some degree. But that's kind of the vision for today of where we're thinking of building. And right now we have YouTube and email, which will be rolling out a lot more in the next couple months. And then we're looking at some of the other ones to do as well. But I was curious because you also deal with, for example, some of the really large channels on YouTube, and they just did YouTube, but now they're starting to think about like how to diversify and not have platform risk.
Yeah, for sure. It's with the larger teams. I think I see like a lot of skepticism when it comes, because there's just so much noise in the real estate space around like content, social media. It's not going to work, or it's for the young agent. And so when a lot of these big teams start, I can like sense they're a bit hesitant. Like, is this going to actually work for me? Am I actually going to get business? And we get into it almost 60 days, 90 days in, and all of a sudden a phone call or an email or multiple phone calls, appointments, and they're like, it's working. Like, it's crazy. I didn't expect it to work. And then they start thinking of like, well, if I can actually build my own lead source and I can own it, what else can I do? Right. And that's the question they kind of start looking. And what we want to do, and what we've already always talked about is, for our larger teams, we don't just want to be like, build this and then we're gone. Right. And a lot of marketing companies do that. They just offer one thing and then eventually the team outgrows them. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to build with the team for the future. Right. So like, if you're a team that goes from doing the X amount of business, doubling, tripling, like, we want a product and solution for every, part of the way. And so that's really where we're looking for. And I think a lot of our bigger teams are kind of starting to understand, like, okay, I can have a channel. Now I get all these leads. So, well, how do I nurture the leads? Well, my nurturing is not as good as it could be. I'm not actually following up with my leads. I'm not actually reaching out to my current database that I have and getting the most out of it I can. Okay, well, can I run a second channel, a team channel? I can do that. Like, they start seeing all these different avenues for, actually, I mean, we've got agents that are starting their fourth channel. It's like, they've got something for their team. They've got something for their local market. They've got something for a podcast. They're building out all these different layers. And, those are really the top of funnel. And then Instagram is another source of top of funnel. But that middle of funnel is also something we're looking to build. And maybe one day the very, very bottom of funnel. But for agents, I think that's, something they don't struggle with. They can close deals. They can do all that. They're good at real estate. Obviously, we make it known, right? That's one of our lines. But yeah, I think if we can get them that top of funnel and middle of funnel, they can take care of the rest, essentially. And that's really where we're trying to step in the most, I would say.
Yeah. Most agents, especially if they're top producers, top teams, top brokers, they're great at real estate. We just want to help them become more known.
Yeah.
So this is obviously the first public announcement of our merge. And it's also the first public announcement of the rebrand, which basically day one for us of Knwn Local. And we've been working on it for 7+ months, working on the website for several months. Where should they go to check it out?
Yeah, so they should go to knwnlocal.com if you guys want to check out the website. Give us your thoughts and let us know what you think. We've got a lot of cool stuff coming over the next couple weeks and months. So yeah, check us out and let us know what you think.